Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today's video is the final video in which we will be looking at all the witness testimony from Johnny's side, which means Monday's video will most likely cover all of this week's testimony from NGN's witnesses, not just Amber Heard. So finally, we will be caught up and completely up to date with this ongoing and always evolving trial. Our first witness today is Mr. Travis McGivern, who is a security guard of Johnny's and has worked for him for 7 years. His cross-examination centered around the 23rd of March 2015, which is the day in which Amber alleges that Johnny was about to push her sister Whitney down the stairs, and so she punched him preemptively in defense of her sister. Mr. McGivern was there on that day in the apartment along with nurse Debbie Lloyd. Ms. Wass put to him that both Johnny and Amber had to be physically restrained, which implies that both of them were being physically abusive towards each other. But Mr. McGivern denied this and maintained that it was only Amber who had to be physically restrained that day. He further testified that Johnny was still in a cast at that time from his finger injury and that he did not lay a finger on Amber or her sister Whitney. Wass challenged him and referred to a text from nurse Debbie Lloyd in which she stated that both of them had to be physically restrained. Mr. McGivern still maintained his position, denied that Johnny had to be physically restrained, and said that he couldn't speculate as to why Miss Debbie Lloyd stated that in her text message, but just because she stated that, that doesn't mean it was true. In re-examination, Mr. Sherborne had Mr. McGivern confirm to the court that Johnny never laid a finger on Amber and that most importantly, Mr. McGivern was standing in between the two of them to shield Johnny more than anything, but he expressly stated in response to a question from Mr. Sherborne that he would have never simply stood there and just allowed Johnny to hit his wife or his wife's sister. And this is exactly what I said in my last video. What are the odds that all of these people, men, in particular, decent men from the looks of it, what are the odds that they would just stand there and let a man beat up his wife and on such a regular basis and never intervene? It just seems highly unlikely. This was a relatively short cross-examination in comparison to all the other witnesses, so Mr. McGivern did well. He stuck to his evidence. Even when he was presented with that text message from Debbie Lloyd, he maintained his position no matter what. Next, we have Laura Divinier, who was an interior decorator and a friend of Amber's. Now, Miss Divinier made it entirely clear to everyone, the court as well, that she did not want to testify or be involved in any way, and that NGN have forced her to testify for the purposes of cross-examining her. Now, there is a recording, a covert recording, that Amber made of Laura. It's a 19-minute long recording, and it is available on Nick Wallace's website, which I always link in the description box below. It's the first link in every single one of these videos. And it was really difficult for me to sit through and listen to it, to be honest with you, because Laura just came across as this wimp. She seemed very terrified of Amber. Now, she says in her testimony during trial that she didn't want to come because she doesn't want to upset Amber. And in the recording, it's very clear that she really doesn't want to upset Amber. First off, I want to clear up one thing. The media is portraying Mr. Adam Waldman, Johnny's US lawyer, as this person who threatened Laura to force her to provide a declaration stating that she never saw Amber bruised or injured from the 21st of May 2016 onwards, specifically until the 27th of May 2016 when she went to court to get the restraining order. I will pop up the text message for you on the screen. I won't be reading it out for you, but essentially, he just told her, listen, you can come off your own accord to talk to me so I can get a declaration off of you, or I will issue a subpoena. And Laura, who admittedly has never had anything to do with any legal process in the past, has never been involved in any case, she says so in the recording, considers being issued a subpoena, which is a lawful process, as a threat and as a coercive course of action. Subpoenas exist because people like Laura exist, people who may have information and evidence that is important and necessary for a case. So subpoenas are not coercive, and they're definitely not threats or blackmail. When you tell someone, if you don't cooperate with me, I will have to issue you a subpoena, that's not a threat. That's just a course of action that is available for them as a lawyer to retrieve information or evidence that they require. It's just ridiculous, and I really wanted to clear that up in this video. So I do want to briefly summarize the recording for you. Laura is very biased in the sense that she is very pro Amber. She says she adores her. She says that she had every right to fire Kate James, her ex-assistant. In fact, Amber actually says on the tape that it was Laura who initially suggested, or who really pushed for getting Kate James fired, because she was a mess, was a horrible employee, didn't know what the hell she was doing, was off the rails, verbatim what Laura says on the recording. She excuses Amber's verbal abuse of Kate James, says that she deserved it. Laura even begs Amber multiple times, and her voice was trembling like she was on the verge of tears, to get Amber's lawyers to get a declaration off of Laura to cancel out anything that she may have said against Amber that may be used against Amber. And towards the end of the video, Amber does something that really paints her out to be someone who is guilty, someone who has something to hide. She asks Laura multiple times in a really nervous, kind of shaky voice. She even laughs nervously, or, kind of lets out a little nervous chuckle when she asks her, "Are you sure you've never seen me being physically or verbally abusive toward Kate James?" And Laura kept saying, no, yeah, I heard you yell at her, but she deserved it. If you're innocent, and if your conscience is clear, and you know for a fact that you have never physically or verbally assaulted someone, you would have no reason to nervously, repeatedly ask that question of someone who may have witnessed something. It just really raised red flags in my mind. So at the end of the day, Mr. Waldman successfully got a declaration out of Laura, and I don't believe she has given one to Amber's side. Initially, Laura denied ever being around Amber at that time and insisted that she was in Africa. But then Mr. Waldman told her, well, I have photos and CCTV footage of you in an elevator with Amber during the days between the 21st of May 2016 leading up to the 27th. And this wasn't just once, it was multiple times during the course of that week. Laura testified that apart from seeing Amber being visibly upset and red from crying, she didn't see any bruises. So here we have someone who has known Amber for 8 years, who adores her, and who doesn't even know Johnny. So she even says on the recording she's never even interacted with him, doesn't know him, and yet she says that Amber wasn't injured. And she was there multiple days, so she had the opportunity to see the bruise get worse and change color, and as bruises do, nothing. In cross-examination, she testified that she was pressured into providing that declaration. So Was attempted to convince the court that everything in that declaration wasn't volunteered by Laura, but rather it was fed to her by Adam Waldman, and she just simply agreed. Laura also testified to witnessing Amber being verbally abusive to Kate James on one occasion. Was also tried to imply that Laura was afraid of Johnny being a powerful and influential man in Hollywood. Again, a tactic that she has used with multiple witnesses. But Laura actually denied this. She said no, didn't feel any pressure from Johnny, just from his lawyer, Adam Waldman. I want to make it clear before we move on to re-examination, Laura is an adult. When she provided the statement or declaration to Johnny's lawyer, she was an adult. She admitted to reading through the declaration and accepting everything that was stated in it as true before signing it. She signed it. Mr. Waldman couldn't sign it on her behalf. It would then be a void statement. So this excuse that people like to use of the lawyer drafted the declaration, I just reviewed it and signed it, is not an excuse or a valid reason for shirking any responsibility for what was said in that statement. Declarations, statements, whatever you want to call them, are never written by the witness themselves. It is up to us lawyers to write it for you, and then you review it and you sign it. So I understand that these people haven't been involved in legal cases, and so they don't know that this is the norm, but I want to point that out to every one of you out there who's watching this, in case you ever find yourself involved in a legal situation or a case in the future. Re-examination involved a little bit of an argument between Mr. Sherborne and Miss Divinier's lawyer, Mr. Sherman, who was in the US with her. Mr. Sherborne wanted to read out and use an email that was sent from Laura to her lawyer, Mr. Sherman, and she sent this email specifically with regards to this libel case in the UK. She stated that her declaration is 100% truthful, and this is the declaration that she provided to Adam Waldman. In retrospect, where I may have thought I was unduly pressured to write and sign my declaration, I now believe that was not the case. I signed my declaration knowing that my declaration was truthful to the best of my recollection. I find the communications from the Sun's lawyers extremely burdensome and threatening. I told the truth and continued to tell the truth here in my letter. I want to be left alone. Most importantly, she says to her lawyer, please forward this letter to all counsel involved with DEPP, Heard, and the Sun newspaper. So, like I said, there was a bit of a back and forth with regards to whether this email is protected by client legal privilege. Now, any communications that transpire between a client and their lawyer is automatically protected by client legal privilege. So no one can have access to them unless the client themselves waive the privilege. The privilege can be waived expressly, so clearly by way of instruction, or implicitly, such as by sharing it with a third party. Even though they didn't necessarily mean to waive the privilege, the sharing of the communications with a third party automatically waives that privilege. Mr. Sherman's argument was that this email was a draft and that it was never intended to be shared with anyone. He even implied that someone must have hacked into his emails and he doesn't know how it was leaked to a third party and therefore shouldn't be disclosed or used in this case because it was protected by client legal privilege. And I do want to clarify with regards to a client sharing the information with a third party, it needs to be an intentional sharing, not an accidental one. So if someone hacked into your emails, or if it's an accidental sharing, so if you've accidentally sent it to the wrong person or you've CC'd them accidentally, of course that doesn't result in an automatic waiver of client legal privilege. So intention is incredibly important. Mr. Sherborne argued that it was not a draft at all, but rather a set of instructions that Laura was giving her lawyer, Mr. Sherman, with regards to how to address this situation. And in fact, she even expressly mentioned that her lawyer is to share this, to forward it and pass it on to all the counsel involved in this case. And they are all third parties. So Mr. Sherborne's main argument with regards to this email was that it was never protected by client legal privilege to begin with because it was always intended to be shared with third parties. It wasn't her seeking legal advice, for example. It wasn't anything that was meant to stay between her and her lawyer. But then he further argued that even if it were protected by client legal privilege, Laura sent the email to Kevin Murphy, who was again a third party, which automatically waived any privilege that may have existed. Mr. Sherman argued that it was never sent to Kevin Murphy. He has no evidence of that, but the judge had enough, and he said that he would make a ruling about this in his overall judgment. Finally, we have Ms. Katherine Kendall, who is an actress and a very prominent activist of the Me Too movement. Now, Ms. Kendall provided a statement to The Sun in which she accused them of twisting and misusing her words to make it look like she was accusing Johnny of domestic violence. Specifically, she stated, "I never meant to be in an article that called Johnny Depp a wife beater. I told you that I didn't know that to be true at all. I have heard several times that she was in fact abusive to him. He's never been a convicted wife beater. It seems that the whole article was about defaming him. I said over and over that I didn't know that he had caused her harm. I'm telling you that you misquoted me and intentionally took things I said out of context in what I now realize was your purpose in defaming Johnny Depp. You have improperly tried to use the #MeToo movement for your purposes by using me in this way." Very strong words, very strong opposition to what Dan Wooten did in his article. Now, both the cross-examination and re-examination of this witness were very short. Was essentially used Ms. Kendall to illustrate to the court that women are terrified of powerful and influential men in Hollywood. And of course, Was had to mention Harvey Weinstein because she was using Harvey as an example of the powerful and influential man in Hollywood that women are fearful of. But then, of course, this trial is about Johnny, and the entire case is centered around all of the witnesses and Amber being fearful of such a powerful and influential man as Johnny Depp. Now, this isn't anything new. Johnny was actually compared to the likes of Harvey Weinstein in the article itself. So Ms. Wass was simply reinforcing that notion to be true. Now, in re-examination, Mr. Sherborne once again delivers. Honestly, he is such an inspiration to me as a young lawyer. I'm learning so much from him just by reading through these transcripts to prepare for these videos. He had Ms. Kendall clarify to the court that Harvey Weinstein is a convicted criminal. He is a convicted rapist who is serving time in prison. He was found guilty in a court of law, not in the court of public opinion, or not in the opinion of a measly tabloid newspaper such as The Sun. So he was illustrating to the court that no one should be comparing an innocent man, Johnny Depp is innocent until proven guilty, to the likes of a convicted, deplorable criminal who has abused scores of women throughout decades. NGN had to sink really low to compare Johnny to Harvey just to win their case. And I'm really hoping that it backfires because it's not right. It's one thing to defend your accusations by using your star witness, Amber Heard. It's one thing to rely on her allegations. It's entirely another to compare Johnny to such a deplorable figure in our society today. That's it for the evidence from Johnny's case. Now, Johnny's witness list was extensive. He had a lot more witnesses in comparison to Amber, which is why it took so long and it took 4 videos to compile all of their evidence. Like I said, in Monday's video, we will most likely be looking at not just Amber's testimony, but her sister and any other witness that is testifying for NGN in week 3 of the trial. I'm gonna sink my teeth straight into it so that I can have the video ready for you guys by Monday. Fingers crossed nothing happens in the interim to delay anything, but that is my goal. And that does mean I will be working very hard over the weekend, but honestly, it's worth it. The truth really matters to me. I've been personally involved in cases where men have been abused by women, and I might even talk about these cases in the future, but I do have a personal kind of fire with regards to this, and it's not just because it's Johnny Depp. It's worth it for me is what I'm trying to say. As always, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm looking forward to reading them. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I will catch you in a future video.